In this unit, we will look at what accessibility means for the web. I assume that you are familiar with common web technologies, at least with HTML and CSS. The World Wide Web Consortium, also known as W3C, 3 Ws and 1 C, has issued the central guidelines for writing accessible websites and web applications, the so-called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, or short WCAG, usually pronounced as WCAG 2.0. For web accessibility to come true, it is important that web authors adhere to these guidelines. Also, authoring tool developers and browser developers have to follow them as well. The WCAG 2.0 guidelines are structured in a hierarchical fashion, and it is important to understand this structure when reading the materials in this unit. The first level consists of 4 principles, known as the POUR principles, according to their first letters: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. All 4 principles must be met for a web page to be accessible. On the second level, each principle is folded out into 1 or more guidelines. Again, each guideline must be met in order for its principle to be met. However, guidelines are not easily testable. This is where the third level comes in: the success criteria. Each guideline is broken into a number of success criteria, each of which must be fulfilled to meet their guideline. Usually, this requires a human expert, but some success criteria can be automatically checked. Success criteria are attributed with a conformance level: single A for a minimum level of accessibility, double A for a medium level, and triple A for the maximum level. In most countries, legislation has adopted double A compliance level as web accessibility requirements. In your assignment, you will focus on single A and double A success criteria, but you should also read and be familiar with the triple A success criteria. It is important to note that everything until now, that is, principles, guidelines, and success criteria, are written in a technology-independent way. That means that you can use any appropriate web technology, for example HTML, JavaScript, PDF, or PHP, to write code that complies with the principles, guidelines, and success criteria of WCAG 2.0. Even if new technologies come up in the future, WCAG will still apply. That's the beauty of WCAG. However, the beauty comes with a price. When implementing a web page, success criteria are too vague to be directly translated into web code. As a web designer, it would be nice to have a list of coding patterns that would help to fulfill a success criterion. These patterns are called techniques in WCAG, and they are written for specific technologies, HTML and so. Some techniques, if followed, guarantee that a success criterion is fulfilled. These are called sufficient techniques. Use any one of the sufficient techniques to fulfill the success criterion it is assigned to. Other techniques are good to follow, but are only part of the solution and not sufficient for fulfilling a success criterion. These are called advisory techniques. Also, there are bad techniques that will result in a barrier and violate a success criterion. These are called failures. They are documented as bad examples, and you should definitely avoid them. Although very useful, the techniques do not belong to the official normative part of WCAG. That's because the set of techniques is frequently modified as technologies continue to be developed and new technologies arrive on the market. It would take too long for techniques to go through the full standardization process. Just think about the fact that it took about 9 years to develop WCAG 2.0 from 1999 to 2008. A last note. When we talk about a web page being accessible in the context of WCAG, we mean that it fulfills the WCAG success criteria to a specified conformance level, A, AA, or AAA. This means that the web page has incorporated some well-known best practices for accessibility as specified by the WCAG guidelines. This will make for a certain level of accessibility that will allow most users to make use of the web page in most circumstances. However, in reality, accessibility very much depends on the user, their equipment and configuration, and the concrete usage scenario. Also, it is more a matter of degree, how much of a web page's information and functionality can be used and how well, than a matter of a binary decision, yes or no for conformance. Having that said, binary success criteria as conformance requirements are valuable because they represent a practical way of a global and sustainable improvement on the situation of people with disabilities and older people using the web. Well, at this point I should mention that WCAG benefits every user in general, even beyond users with disabilities. The conformance requirements of WCAG can then be picked up by legislation. We will talk more about that in our last unit. For now, enjoy this lesson.